Hey friends, welcome back to another Seed Talk with Lisa and Layne, and happy Thanksgiving, Layne.
Happy Thanksgiving.
So glad you guys are joining us here. Remember that you can catch our podcast on any podcast app and over on our YouTube channel where you can see our beautiful slideshow that Layne puts together. So, Layne, what are we going to be chatting about today?
So it is Thanksgiving Day here in the United States. And last year on Thanksgiving Day, we actually did an episode on two flowers we were thankful for. And Lisa, you picked sunflowers and I picked straw flowers. So this year, we're going to keep with the tradition and we're going to do two more flowers that we're thankful for. So we're just going to be going through our two picks for this year.
Awesome. All right, dive in. So, Layne, let's get started.
Okay, so my pick for this year is going to be foxgloves, aka digitalis. I think Lisa knows these are one of my very favorite flowers. I think most people know what foxgloves look like. They're these extremely showy spikes that are just loaded with these tubular flowers. They're bell-shaped flowers along the stem. They usually have little freckles on the inside, and sometimes the throats inside those flowers are actually a different color than the rest of the flower, which adds a really interesting multi-dimensional look. And there are so many different colors you can choose from. There are whites and creams, pinks, purples, yellows, apricots, and the flowers open from the bottom of the stem up. So if you're trying to use them as a landscape plant, which is how I very often use them, I have some pictures up from my garden letting them go into full bloom. It provides a really long lasting show because it just opens slowly all the way from the bottom up. And it also provides a really long period of time for pollinators to enjoy everything that the flowers have to offer. And bees and hummingbirds love foxgloves. And one of the most fun activities is watching little bumblebees scoot in and out of the flowers.
Yes.
Lisa, can you actually talk about the proper harvest stage for foxglove if you're wanting to use it as a cut flower and how all this bee action influences that?
Sure. So, this was like the top seller to Colonial Williamsburg when we sold to them
Oh,
all of those
really?
years. Yeah, they were definitely the top consumer of these blooms because of it just was a native, a natural fit for them. So we would actually cut digitalis when the first just one or two blooms are open on the bottom, because very similar to snapdragons, once they're pollinated, then that little flower says, I've done my job here, and it falls off. So we try to beat the bees to it. But yeah, they're just really, really beautiful.
They are. And that's one of the other things I love when a plant can double as a great landscape plant, a lot of landscape value, and you can use it as a cut flower. And on the farm, Lisa, you actually grow it as a cut and come again flower.
We actually got multiple stems, the same experience that we had with snaps. And the other thing for us is we actually grew them out in full sun, which they really do like dapple shade. But they produced more. And because it was like we treated them as a cool flower, we grew the annual variety, the hardy annual. And yeah, they definitely produce more stems when you cut them.
Yeah. And they do work really well. They're one of the few really striking showy flowers that work well in part shade. Like Lisa said, I have a lot of woodland areas and they just thrive in there. They're so striking. Everyone that comes by our house has to comment on them because we grow different varieties. You can have some that are just 2 to 3 feet tall, and then some can get head high. You can take your pick. And they're just all so beautiful. All parts of the plants are poisonous, which means you might want to use caution if you're planting them and you have pets or children that might be curious. But for me, that means that the deer, the rabbits, and the voles really leave them alone. They're one of the few plants that I've never had any issue with any of those creatures eating them. And like Lisa mentioned, there are a lot of varieties that are true biennials, but you can get varieties that are first year flowering. So if you wanted to plant them out in very early spring, they should bloom that same year.
Right.
Camelot, Dalmatian, and Foxy are some examples of first year flowering foxgloves if you're looking for those.
Yeah.
And another great thing about foxgloves in terms of arrangements is that they look really beautiful in a mixed bouquet, or you could just do a really striking single arrangement with just foxgloves in it. Do you like that too, Lisa?
Yes. And, just having them in a vase was just strikingly beautiful. I used them for church
Yes.
flowers for 2 weeks. I was able to cuddle them along and really just make them super happy.
Yeah, I love them. I literally can't imagine my garden without them. I start all mine from seed in 3/4 inch or 2 centimeter soil blocks. but they are a tiny seed and they do take a little longer to grow to a transplant size than a lot of the other flowers we talk about. But if you have any difficulties or just prefer not to start them from seed yourself for whatever reason, you can buy plugs as
You
well.
can. And can I tell a little story?
Yeah.
Digitalis. So Steve, back when Steve and I were first married, we would often go to Harrisonburg, Virginia for a Ziegler family reunion. And we would do that on Steve's dad's brother's farm. And his wife was OC Ziegler. And OC was a big gardener. I mean, her farm, she really sparked a lot of my interest in growing. That was actually before I was flower farming. And she gave me some starts of digitalis that still are here on my farm.
Oh,
And they
wow.
reseed. So they're an old variety, they're biennials. And yeah, so those are super sweet. But saying they're biennials means that there's plants that don't bloom. And so you have to really be focused on not eliminating them to allow
Right.
them to get that time in the garden. And yeah, so digitalis has a really special place for me. They're just a great landscape plant.
They are. They're just beautiful. And it's great to have them out there as a landscape plant. And then, like I said, if you want to cut some and bring them indoors, you have the option of doing that as well. So they're just really versatile. And I love foxgloves.
Me too. And Layne, I think it just generally boils down to is if you harvest that first jumbo central stem, then the plant is inclined to just produce a lot more pretty good stems. Not as big as the first one, but they'll be much bigger than what regrows around the base of that central stem when it's left. So
Right.
it just depends on what your use is. And I mean, your display is just beautiful.
So that was my pick for this Thanksgiving. And it was a spike flower. And interestingly enough, Lisa has also picked a spike flower. Lisa's pick for this Thanksgiving is snapdragons.
My love for snapdragons goes long and deep. That was, I don't know if you know this, Layne, maybe we have talked about this. Snapdragons were the very first flower I ever attempted to start from seed in soil blocks.
I think I did know that. And you had success.
And I mean, after having tried other methods of seed starting and being a dismal, experience, I started, it's like, okay, I'm going to do this. I read the Flower Farmer book and I'm going to start seeds. I have to be able to start seeds if I'm going to be a flower farmer. And I thought, and I learned that first off, snapdragons were a cool season hardy annual and I could plant them in the fall. And, it was a really important crop. So I did it. And I can still literally remembering the happy dance. I had a sunroom back then. It was in another house of going down and seeing those sprouts, the
Oh,
first sprouts. It was pretty significant. And then imagine how funny it was to learn years later that snaps are supposedly one of the most trying seeds to start. You know what I mean? I didn't even know that then. Um,
yeah.
but snaps went on to become really important to me because, I learned that it was a significant cash crop for commercial customers. As well as, so, I sold to florists for a couple of years before I entered the Williamsburg Farmers Market. And the Williamsburg Farmers Market is a very well policed producer only market. And what that means is that you can only sell what you grow or make or produce. And they show up at your property every now and then just to be sure. Because believe me, that's a whole conversation in itself. There are people out there that buy stuff trying to pass it off, right? So lo and behold, the market manager showed up to our place. And in fact, she was also the floral designer from Colonial Williamsburg for many years. And she walked into this building that I'm literally sitting in now, but back then it didn't have nearly as much bells and whistles as it does now, right? But she walked in the door and there were just buckets and buckets of snaps. I've always had a real problem controlling myself over the
Yeah.
number of snapdragons that I start. She walked in the door, stopped dead in her tracks, closed her eyes, took a big sniff, garden snaps. And it just like took her back, because
Yeah.
any florist listening or anybody that ships in stems, knows that when you open a box of flowers, what you smell are chemicals because they've been treated to keep them from rotting and mildewing and keeping them alive. And that just fueled my fire
Yeah.
of growing more snaps. And then the journey that, for many years, I only grew Rocket, which was the go-to old heirloom, most commercially grown. Then I discovered there were many other snaps. And in fact, when I started growing these different varieties of snaps, realizing that they had a little bit different timing of when they bloom, even though they were all fall planted at the same time. And it just really just fueled me. It was an easy grower for me. They were super winter hardy here, their abundance and their height. And then, of course, our commercial customers bought gobs because they were such
Yeah.
great quality and local. And they were everywhere from, I'm trying to think, the shortest snap that we typically grow is about 36 inches. I mean, that's super tall, right? And then as they age out, they can get shorter. But we've had some flowers like Maryland and rockets come in, 4 feet tall. And I mean, there's just nothing
Yeah.
about them that makes me want to grow less.
Yeah. And I just think there are colors and forms for everyone. You can get these really roughly double petaled types like Madame Butterfly, or these gorgeous open face types like Chantilly, or even just the traditional looking snapdragons like Rocket.
Yeah.
They're all so beautiful. And again, there are so many different colors to choose from. You can get whites and pinks, lavenders, reds, yellows, oranges, peach tones, or apricots. And like you mentioned, Lisa, I really like that you can have the option of planting all at the same time in fall. And if you plant from all the different groups, naturally they will bloom in succession.
And that's kind of the story of how the TGW dragon mixes that you put together came to be is, one day I was here harvesting by myself, had all these different snapdragon varieties and all these different colors. And I decided because we sell flowers by color to commercial customers, right? And it was a slow day. Bobo wasn't here because doing what I'm about to tell you is a real time waster. I mean, no one should ever harvest flowers like this. Instead of just going up and down the rows and cutting, I literally was filling buckets by going from pink here to pink over there to pink over here. So all the pinks were together in a bucket, which was the way that I offered them, right? And the way that we made
Yeah.
bouquets. Well, when I brought those buckets in and saw the variety of the different structured blooms and the different shades of colors amongst all those different ones, I mean, it was like, how much easier would it be for me as a grower to start one pack of seeds and have all the colors together and have them bloom over a longer period? It just fueled my fire. I love snaps more now than I ever did.
And every farmer that I've talked to has consistently listed snapdragons as one of the most profitable plants per square foot. Is that your experience as well,
Oh,
Lisa?
yeah. Yes, because it's great to sell to florists, but they're also just, you have to have them for bouquet work. And
Right.
people love them, people just love them.
They do. And this is also another one, if you're growing it as a landscape plant, that bees absolutely adore.
Yes, and I often say that, planting, so Chantilly, the picture that Layne has up on our PowerPoint, it's Madame Butterfly on the left, that's the double, and then that is Chantilly on the right, which is a completely different looking bloom. Chantilly is one of the earliest ones. It's from group one. Snaps are categorized in groups of kind of when they bloom, and group one blooms earliest. They bloom during short days. So, because of bumblebees' love of snapdragons, you definitely want to plant snaps where your tomato patch is because it really brings the bumblebees in early to be right there to help. Because, bumblebees are the only pollinator that can help your self-pollinating tomatoes to do a better job. So, snaps are very important in a small cutting garden, in a cutting garden that's in a vegetable patch. But they're awesome cut flowers. They're just a great flower. We love them. I'm so grateful for them.
I love them. I'm thankful for them too. And in the landscape, of course, you could let them just open from the bottom of the stem up and bloom out. Lisa, remind everyone when you would recommend cutting them if they were to be used as a cut flower.
Sure. We try to cut them as the very first bottom flower is beginning to open. They quickly and easily continue to develop indoors. And that just really prevents the bees from pollinating them, which leads to premature floret drop. So snaps are just really once you master seed starting, which really, friends, they're just surface sown. You have to just keep them moist. I find the wide weave burlap works really, really well. If you can get them to germinate and get them out to your garden, I think you'll be so pleasantly surprised of how vigorous they are when they're planted at the proper time. And so we plant again in very early spring, but I only plant the later groups, group 3 and 4. Those are the groups of snaps that bloom during longer days. If you were to spring plant or very early spring plant, like the Chantilly that's group 1 that blooms in short days, they don't have long enough to grow up to get tall enough. So I just want to say experiment in your conditions and find your sweet spot because they are sweet.
They sure are. Okay, well, that does it for this Thanksgiving edition of Seed Talk. If you are celebrating Thanksgiving today, we just want to wish you a wonderful day with your family and friends and hopefully some really good food. So thank you so much for joining us. If you have any spare time and you're watching over on YouTube, feel free to leave a comment with a flower that you're thankful for or a food item that you're thankful that you're going to be eating today. So thank you so much for joining us again.
And so I just want to piggyback on what Layne said. And Layne, I am grateful for you and for Seed Talk and for your work. And you brought this all to light. And I know that people really, really appreciate it. And so I appreciate Layne does all the work behind this, y'all. I just show up and talk, literally. And that's what makes this possible because of all the hard work that Layne puts into it. But as she would probably say, we both really love what we do and get real high reward from it. And that just when you love what you do, it's still work, but it's not the grind of work that most people associate with the word work, right?
And I'm very thankful for you too, Lisa, and I'm sure everyone listening is as well. So thank you for, in your words, showing up and talking every week.
It's my pleasure if you couldn't tell.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. And so friends, until we meet again, ciao.
Bye.